Putin's original plan about Ukraine. I translated for you a couple of Russian propaganda articles written by Timofey Sergeytsev in 2021 and 2022. What should we do with Ukraine and what kind of Ukraine we don't need? This video will help you to understand what was the original idea behind full-scale invasion in 2022 and why that idea was there long ago, and absolutely there is nothing anybody could have done to stop that or prevent that. There are some propagandist things going on that what if United States wouldn't do this or would do that? What if Zelensky would say that or didn't say this? Nothing of this matters. It's always Putin's plan all along, and I'm gonna prove it to you. We will watch where it is published in RIA Novosti, the main Russian propagandist place, the main Russian official place, government place in media. And it's still there. 2 years later, it's still there. And I translated it for you. Russian fascism at its worst. Please don't throw up. I almost did. I hope I won't. Anyways, hi, I'm Elena, and this is my political channel Enough. I created it and operated by myself. I don't belong to any political parties or any movements politically associated with anyone. I'm originally from Russia and live over 18 years in Canada. And this is what I have to tell you, since I'm an expert in the war in Ukraine. I researched it for over nine years, from Maidan period and the whole thing. So I can save you time, and you can find all the information you need to know right here on my channel. Anyways, this is a map of Ukraine, and not much happening lately. Still going battles around Bakhmut, and Russia still can't get it. And yet, Russian propagandists now trying to explain people how wonderful that they didn't capture Kiev, because they didn't really want it. I immediately remember the old, like a fairy tale, written by Ivan Krylov about fox and grapes. When grapes were too high and fox looking at grapes and looking, and well, this grapes is too green. It's not ripe yet. I don't even really want it. So, when the war started a year ago, I'll probably will have another video just in general about the war. The war started basically in 2014, but the full-scale invasion of Russia invaded Ukraine in February 24th, 2022. So, right before that time, I was quoting to Russians another kind of like fairy tale when animals representing people, I forgot that word in English, sorry, about wolf and a lamb. And in this case, Russia was a wolf and Ukraine was lamb. But now I'm quoting another one. The grapes were too green. It wasn't ripe enough. Putin's war in Ukraine failed. It was a stupid idea from the very beginning. But it was based on some delusional ideas of Putin. Personally, Putin. This man, Timofey Sergeytsev, author of the articles I will gonna talk to you about, he's columnist on RIA Novosti, which is main Russian propagandist channel. He also included in the report of 1,500 warmongers. And one of the bad guys who approved that war more than that he considered it's necessary. Murder of Ukrainian peoples is necessary. This is who it is. I have to apologize to you guys that I'm gonna read to you these articles. Well, one article and another one I just will mention to you. This is RIA Novosti. I'm showing you where it is from. This is official Russian news, state news, propaganda news, one of the main places of the Russian propaganda. The date of this article, the 3rd of April 2022, and it was renewed in 5th of April 2022. This is article number 1. And we will talk about this first, and then we'll talk about second article, and you will find out what kind of plans Russia had for Ukraine. And they are stupid enough still keeping it in the internet for everybody to see. What should Russia do with Ukraine? Back in April last year, we wrote about the inevitability of the denazification of Ukraine. We don't need Nazi Bandera Ukraine, the enemy of Russia and the West's tool for the destruction of Russia. Today, the issue of denazification has moved into an action. They mean denazification of Ukraine. This is Timofey Sergeytsev, and this is his article. And the previous article he's talking about in here, I will show you a little later. What do they think about denazification? Let's see that. Denazification is necessary when a significant part of the people, most likely the majority, has been drawn by the Nazi regime in its politics. This is when the hypothesis the people are good, the government is bad, doesn't work. Recognition of this fact is the basis of the policy of denazification, of all its measures, and this fact itself is its subject matter. This is it. Humanitarian aid from Russian Federation. Ukraine is in just such a situation. The fact that Ukrainian voter voted for the world of Poroshenko and world of Zelensky should not be misleading. The Ukrainians were quite satisfied with the shortest path to peace through the blitzkrieg, which last two Ukrainian presidents transparently hinted at when they were elected. It was this method of appeasement of internal anti-fascists through total terror that was used in Odessa, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Mariupol, and other Russian cities. Keep in mind, they're talking about that Odessa, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Mariupol are Russian cities. And this is April 2022. And this quite suited the Ukrainians. Denazification is a set of measures in relation to the Nazified mass of the population, which is technically cannot be subjected to direct punishment as war criminals. So keep in mind, I'm just quoting this article. I completely disagree with what it says. Most of this information is just complete and out of lie. There is nothing true about what Sergeytsev saying about Ukraine or Nazis, and if I use the bad words like Ukrainian Nazis or something like that, I'm just quoting his article. This is a piece of garbage Russian propaganda, but this is important for understanding what Russian president and Russian government is thinking about Ukraine. Thought about Ukraine back then, and this is what their goal with Ukraine is. Everybody was wanting to know what's Putin's goal, what Putin wants. Here it is. The Nazis who took up arms should be destroyed to the maximum on the battlefield. There should be no significant differences between the armed forces of Ukraine and the so-called national battalions, as well as the territorial defense. They joined these two types of military formations. All of them are equally involved in the extreme cruelty against the civilian population, are equally guilty of the genocide of the Russian people, do not comply with the laws and customs of war. Well, they say Ukrainians don't comply. Russia attacked Ukraine. It's not quoting, that's what I'm saying. Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014, was murdering their people for 8 years, then get full-scale invasion in 2022, committed crimes in Bucha, in Slavyansk in 2014, and many other places in Ukraine, but that's what they're thinking about Ukrainians and Ukraine. Continue quoting. War criminals and active Nazis should be exemplary and exponentially punished. There must be a total illustration. Any organizations that have associated themselves with the practice of Nazism must be liquidated and banned. However, in addition to the top, a significant part of the masses, which are passive Nazis, accomplices of Nazism are also guilty. They supported and indulged Nazi power. The just punishment of this part of the population is possible only as bearing the inevitable hardships of a just war against the Nazi system, conducted as carefully and prudently as possible in relation to civilians. Yeah, we see what Putin does about that. This is my comment. Continue quoting. Further denazification of this mass of the population consists in re-education, which is achieved by ideological repression, suppression of Nazi attitudes, and strict censorship, not only in the political sphere, but also necessarily in the sphere of culture and education. It was through culture and education that deep mass Nazification of the population was prepared and carried out, secured by the promise of dividends from the victory of the Nazi regime over Russia, Nazi propaganda, internal violence and terror, as well as the 8-year war with the people of Donbass who rebelled against Ukrainian Nazism. This is complete garbage, sorry, but I'm continuing reading it. Denazification can only be carried out by the winner, which implies, first, his absolute control over the denazification process, and second, the power to ensure such control. In this respect, a denazified country cannot be sovereign. The denazifying state, Russia, cannot proceed from a liberal approach with regard to denazification. The ideology of the denazifier cannot be disputed by the guilty party subject to denazification. Russia's recognition of the need to denazify Ukraine means the recognition of the impossibility of the Crimean scenario for Ukraine as a whole. However, this scenario was not possible in 2014 in the rebellious Donbass either. Only 8 years of resistance to Nazi violence and terror led to internal coercion and a consciousness, an ambiguous mass refusal to maintain any unity and connection with Ukraine, which defined itself as a Nazi society apparently. You can watch my video about that, how many Nazis are in Ukraine and how much more Nazis in Russia. Yet nobody denazifying Russia so far. And the next paragraph. This one. The terms of denazification can in no way be less than one generation, which must be born, grow up, and reach maturity under the conditions of denazification. The Nazification of Ukraine continued for more than 30 years, beginning at least in 1989, when Ukrainian nationalism received legal and legitimate forms of political expression and led the movement for independence towards Nazism. Apparently, being independent country mean, in Russian opinion and in opinion Mr. Sergeytsev, as a as a Nazism. Let's see what he's saying further. So this is on which Russian propaganda and Russian government are standing. This is their ideas. In one article, everything. The peculiarity of modern Nazified Ukraine is an amorphousness and ambivalence which make it possible to disguise Nazism as a desire for independence and a European, Western, pro-American path of development. In reality, to degradation. To assert that in Ukraine there is no Nazism, only private individual excesses. After all, there is no main Nazi party, no Führer, no full-fledged Russian laws, only the truncated version of the form of repressions against the Russian language. As a result, there is no opposition and resistance to the regime. However, all of the above does not make Ukrainian Nazism a light version of German Nazism. During the first half of the 20th century. On the contrary, since Ukrainian Nazism is free from such genre, essentially political technology, frameworks and restrictions, it freely unfolds, and the fundamental basis of any Nazism as European and its most developed form, American racism, Therefore, denazification cannot be carried out in a compromise on the basis of a formula like NATO no, European Union yes. The collective West itself is the designer, source, and sponsor of Ukrainian Nazism, where the Western Bandera staff and people and their historical memory are just one of the tools for the Nazification of Ukraine. Ukranazism carries not less but a greater threat to the world and Russia than German Nazism of a Hitlerite version. Who knew? Until Sergeytsev told us, we had no idea that apparently Ukrainian Nazism is more scary, non-existent, I would say. Ukrainian Nazism is more scary than German Nazism. Unbelievable. This is important part. Very important part. The name Ukraine apparently cannot be retained as the title of any fully denazified state entity in the territory liberated from the Nazi regime. The People's Republics newly created in the space free from Nazism should and will grow from the practice of economic self-government and social security, restoration and modernization of the life support systems of the population. In reality, their political aspirations cannot be neutral. Expiation of guilt before Russia for treating it as an enemy can be realized only by relying on Russia in its process of restoration, revival, and development. No Marshall Plans should be allowed for those territories. There can be no neutrality in an ideological and practical sense compatible with denazification. The employees and organizations that are the instrument of denazification in the newly denazified republics cannot but rely on Russia's direct military and organizational support. Denazification will inevitably also be a de-Ukrainization, a rejection of the large-scale artificial inflation of the ethnic component of self-identification of the population of the territories of historical Little Russia and Novorossia, begin by the Soviet authorities. I'll skip a little bit. Let's talk about Georgia and Baltic countries. Denazification Sergeytsev talking about. Unlike, say, Georgia and the Baltic countries, Ukraine is, as history has shown, is impossible as a nation state, and attempts to build one naturally lead to Nazism. Ukrainism is an artificial anti-Russian construction that doesn't have its own civilizational content, a subordinate element of an alien and adverse civilization. So he's saying that the denazification of Ukraine is also its inevitable de-Europeanization. The Bandera elite must be liquidated, eliminated. Its re-education is impossible. The social Bog, which actively and passively supported it by action and inaction, must survive the hardship of the war and assimilate the experience as a historical lesson, an atonement for its guilt. Those who did not support the Nazi regime suffered from it, and the war unleashed by him in the Donbass must be consolidated and organized, must become the pillar of the new government, its vertical and horizontal. Historical experience shows that the tragedies and dramas of wartime benefits people who have been tempted and carried away by the role of an enemy of Russia. This is my comment. Apparently the hardship of the war benefit people. Who knew? We thought war is horrible, but Sergeytsev thinking it benefits people. I would be interested to see how it would benefit him if he will be in the war, but I don't think he is. We will skip a little bit more. Just, it's a big article, I just don't want you to get bored. All of the above means that in order to achieve the goals of denazification, the support of the population is necessary in transition to the side of Russia after liberation from terror, violence, and ideological pressure of the Kiev regime, after the withdrawal from informational isolation. It is impossible to foresee in advance exactly in which territories such a mass of the population will constitute a critically needed majority. The line of alienation, however, will be found empirically. It will remain hostile to Russia but forcibly neutral and demilitarized Ukraine with formally banned Nazism. The haters of Russia will go there. The guarantee of the preservation of this residual Ukraine in a neutral state should be the threat of an immediate continuation of the military operation in case of non-compliance with the listed requirements. Perhaps this will require a permanent Russian military presence on its territory. The operation to denazify Ukraine, which begins with a military phase, will follow the same logic and stages in peacetime as a military operation. And at each of them, it will be necessary to achieve irreversible changes, which will become the results of the corresponding stage. In this case, the necessary initial steps of denazification can be defined as follows. So this is the whole list of what first steps supposed to be. Number 1, liquidation of armed Nazi formations, which mean any armed formations of Ukraine, including the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as military, informational, educational infrastructure that ensures their activity. The formation of bodies of national self-government and police. And installation of the Russian information space. Taking away withdrawal of education materials and ban on educational programs at all levels containing Nazi ideological guidelines. This is more interesting. Mass investigative actions to establish personal responsibility for war crimes, crimes against humanity, the spread of Nazi ideology and support for the Nazi regime. Next one is very interesting as well. Lustration, publication of the names of accomplices of the Nazi regime, involving them in forced labor to restore the destroyed infrastructure as a punishment for Nazi activities, from among those who will not be subject to the death penalty or imprisonment. So, what I'm trying to say, according to this article, Ukrainians either have to be killed or sent to gulags for free labor to rebuild what Russia destroyed in Ukraine. And the rest of them who disagree get to have death penalty or imprisonment. Adaptation at the local level under the supervision of Russia of primary normative acts of denazification from below, a ban of all types and forms of the revival of Nazi ideology. The establishment of memorials commemorate signs, monuments to the victims of Ukrainian Nazism, perpetuating the memory of the heroes of the struggle against it. The inclusion of a complex anti-fascist and denazification norms in the constitution of the new People's Republics, which, as my comment is, Russia will create on the territory of former Ukraine. Creation of permanent denazification bodies for a period of 25 years. Russia will have no allies in the denazification of Ukraine, since this is a purely Russian business. Remember that, it's a purely Russian business. This is... In order to put the plan of denazification of Ukraine into practice, Russia itself will have to finally part with pro-European and pro-Western illusions, realize itself as the last instance of protecting and preserving those values of historical Europe, the old world, that deserve it and which the West ultimately abandoned. And blah blah blah. Russia did everything possible to save the West in the 20th century and so on, but West wasn't grateful, basically, he is saying. The last act of Russian altruism was the outstretched hand of friendship from Russia, from which Russia received a monstrous blow in 1990s. Yeah, all countries was helping Russia at the time. Russian oligarchs stole all the money which foreign countries sent it to Russia. Again, this is my comment. And yeah, Russia received the blow. Wonderful. Everything that Russia has done for the West, it has done at its own expense by making the greatest sacrifice, and the West ultimately rejected all these sacrifices, devalued Russian contribution to resolving the Western cities crisis, and decided to take revenge on Russia for the help that it selflessly provided. As a part of this process, Russia has a high potential for partnerships and allies with countries that the West has oppressed for centuries and which are not going to put it on its yoke again. Without Russian sacrifice and struggle, these countries would not have been liberated. The denazification of Ukraine is at the same time its decolonization, which the population of Ukraine will have to understand as it begins to free itself from intoxication, temptation, and dependence of the so-called European choice. I wonder how Russians would enjoy if that would be done to them. They basically wrote out the whole plan what to do with Ukraine. They thought they're gonna take Kiev in 3 days a year ago. And this is exactly the plan. What to do with the country to denazify it. Right now, fascist country is Russia, it's not Ukraine. I wonder would Russians, if just change in this article every word Russia to Ukraine and the other way around, if to write about Russia the same way Russia wrote about Ukraine. I sure wonder would Russians like that to be done to them? Would Sergeytsev be happy to be executed or imprisoned for him being Nazi? I really would sincerely interested to know that. This is the second article. It's a long article. I'm not gonna translate this one much. And all the translations I will give in the description of the video. Russian President Vladimir Putin has formulated 3 Russian prohibitions that define the impossible for Ukraine. We will not let Ukrainian Donbass to be crushed by force. If an offensive is attempted, the nominal state of Ukraine will be liquidated. They call it nominal state. None of the formerly independent republics that fell away from Russia during the dismantling of the USSR, not only Ukraine, can be used by the West to harm Russia. So basically Putin is saying that they can do whatever they want, and every other former republics of USSR or Warsaw Pact countries, basically the fair game. And the same thing, basically this article said the same thing, that Russia as a country and people that fatally suffered from Nazi aggression can carry out the denazification of Ukraine within the framework of its own military jurisdiction, military tribunal, without resorting to the institutions of international justice. То есть, this article was published in 2021, in April, way before full-scale invasion, the whole year before full-scale invasion. So this is all Putin wanted to do to Ukraine, and he basically saying, and Sergeytsev saying that Ukrainian people, they all guilty. In this article also, it said that the role of the Nazi party in Ukraine is played by immigrants from the Western United provinces, who have penetrated all systems of politics, education, culture, and the armed forces, and carried away, according to various conservative estimates, up to 40% and possibly more of the population of Ukraine. There should be no illusions about this. So it's basically, if to count population of Ukraine in 2021, it was 43.79 million people. So 40%, 17.5 million people. Putin was ready to eliminate lustration or murder or executions, and for next 25 years, basically re-educating them and doing all of this against Ukrainian will. That even name of Ukraine might not be saved. This is Russian fascism at its worst. Hopefully you didn't throw up in your TV screen and computer screen or telephone, whatever you're watching it on. I hated to translate it, I hated to repeat it, but this is what Russian plans are and were for Ukraine. Russian fascism should be stopped. Ukraine must be defended, because this is going further. If not stop it in Ukraine, and Ukrainians doing a great job to stopping it, this fascism going to other countries. It will go to other countries. Nobody would be saved. Because Putin thinking, sincerely thinking, delusionally thinking that he has a right to do that to other people, to do it to Ukraine. So we're welcome to read the whole thing in the description, the first article and the pieces of second article, and or in the comments. This is what in Putin's head. This is what in the head of Russians, some Russians, with imperial ambitions, truly believing that they have a right to do it to independent country who doesn't want to be ruled by Russia or anybody else for that matter. This is what Ukrainians are fighting for. This is what some ignorant or stupid or corrupted politicians in the West, a few of them, not many, thinking we should abandon and let Putin have it. Putin is coming for us after them. I want you to remember these articles. These articles would be a part of the next Nuremberg process, maybe court in Mariupol or something like that, where war criminals like Putin and many Russian citizens would be guilty party on this process. And no doubt that Ukraine defending itself, they don't want to die. This doctrine, this is what Russia wanted and still wants to do to Ukraine. That is why Ukraine is defending itself to the last drop of their blood. And that is why the whole world is standing with Ukraine and helping Ukraine. Because for them, it's either win or die. This is the program Putin has for Ukraine. So big chunk of them will be killed, some illustrated or whatever, with reducing of their human rights. The whole country would be wiped off the map, word of Ukraine would be forbidden, and this is what's gonna happen. According to Putin's plan, it's not gonna happen. Putin lost the war, but this is what he wanted. And Ukraine would be just a stepping stone. After Ukraine would be other countries, would be Moldova, would be Belarus, would be Baltic countries, would be Poland, would be Germany. That is why the whole world standing up against Putin. And that is why we all have to stand up against Putin. Putin must be stopped. Please help Ukraine. Thank you for watching and have a great evening.